Okay, I'm going to click on Remote Access Logging and Policies right now and launch the NPS, the Network Policy Services. Okay, and we'll launch that. Okay, and we're going to have to configure this to allow for users to connect to our server. So accounting, network policies, IP filters. A lot of things we can do here to control access to our server for somebody who wants to remote in. So we'll click on accounting, and this is different than previous servers. All right, I'll click next. I'll just say can log accounting data to local text file. If you had an SQL Server database, log to SQL Server database. I'm just going to have log to a text file on the local computer, and all of these, the information that'll be logged, it looks like, will be sent to log files, and that looks good. I'll just take the default, so accounting requests, authentication requests, stuff like that, and hit next and close. And so now I've configured the accounting. I'm just picking a very default situation there, and then we'll scroll down. Now we'll go to network policies, and we need to set up network policies for clients that want to connect. So once they connect, they have to meet a policy to gain access to the network. So we need to set up a policy here. You can see here some policies that are deny access policies. So we need to set up an access policy which will enable access. Okay, now I need to create a network policy. You can see I did one here called test already, and I'll show you that. I'll just do it again so you can see that happen. Okay? So I'm going to right click here, click new, and then I'll just call this network policy test 2. All right, and then the type of network access server. This is going to be remote access server, VPN / dial-up or dash dial-up. I'll click next, and now I need to add the condition of the network policy that the user who's trying to access the network has to meet. Okay, so I'll click add, and then you have a bunch of choices here for the kind of condition that the person trying to connect will have to meet. So what I chose was needs to be part of a certain group. So I clicked group and click add, and then I have to pick the group, and so I have to add the group, and I have a group on my created already called G students. So I just went G students, check the name, verify that, and click OK, and then I have that, and I can click OK, and you can see user groups, Dan's Lab, G students, right? And that looks good. And now I can hit next, and then I have to say, okay, last but not least is for this group, are they going to have access granted or access denied, or will you determine it by access is determined by user dial-in properties which override NPS policy. You could use the dial-in properties tab. Let's check that out for this one. So I'll click next, and then the type of authentication that's going to happen here. So I picked the default, which we said was going to be you could have EAP, and then this is MS Chap version 2. All right, I hit next, and then timeout time. I said we'll time out after 7 minutes, right? And click next, and then if you had a Radius server or Radius client situation, you could configure that here and just hit next, because I don't, and then hit finish, and I have test and test 2, and notice how these defaulted to going above the deny access ones. So that's nice. We want to grant access before denying everyone access. So these need to be stacked from more specific policies to more general policies. And normally you want to have your enabled policies up at the top also, and you can move these up or down. So you could right click and say move down, move up, that kind of situation here. And then just to show you my my users, let's see here. Where do I have them? Users, I have a OU called students in my domain. This is my Active Directory users and computers. I've got a students OU, and in there I've got a security group called G students, and I've got a test user that's a member of this group. And I can go to this test user, and I can go to properties, and let's see here. I can go to the dial-in tab, and I can set it here to control access through the NPS network policy, which is the ones we just setting, or I can click here allow access, right? So I can have control the network access permissions for dialing in or for remoting in, however you want to call it, right here, and click OK, right? And so two ways that this can be controlled. This can be controlled from the dial-in tab on the user, or it could be controlled from your network policy server. And so, and with this one, NPS is evaluating the policy, and so if I double click on the policy, you'll see here, this is my first one that I'm looking at, this top one, test. And it says, if enabled, NPS evaluates this policy, access permission, grant access, or you could say ignore user account dial-in properties. So ignore the properties on the dial-in tab that we just looked at on the user, right? And then here we're going to have to set conditions, and then there's constraints that we have to set and settings. And so for that one, that's fine. And then for test 2, we'll double click on that, and I could say grant access, and then once again ignore user account dial-in properties tab if I wanted to ignore the user or not. So I mean, both of these are doing the same thing. So I've got two policies that are essentially doing very similar things. Okay, once again, we're still looking at these network policies. I've set up two network policies to for VPNing into my network, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to click on this top policy, test again, and look at it one more time. So policy is enabled, we're granting access, right? Or we could ignore user dial-in properties tab. If this is not check marked, then the user has to have the dial-in tab set. And once again, we've already set that. This is going to be a type of network access server, remote access server, VPN dial-up, that's good. Conditions, we set up the condition that it has to be a member of the students group that I set up on my server under an OU. And constraints. Here you can further constrain whether what this person is going to have access to, or when they can get in or not. So the timeout times, also day and time restrictions, and then port type. What type of connection are they going to need to get in on? So we set here VPN, let's say, 802.1x connection tunnel types. You could set that here. You know, are they going to be, if you're going to have a wireless connection happening or something like that, you could set that up. All right, I'll click apply. All right, and then further settings over here. So those are constraints, right? Authentication methods, type of authentication, all that. And then I'll click on the settings tab. And if you're going to have a radius server for wireless clients, you set that up. Vendor specific stuff here. Other settings that I'm not even sure about. If you want to filter based on IP addresses, if you want to set you've got some encryption settings here and some further IP settings here to determine the type of IP address that's going to be set, right? So some of these settings that you can set are redundant. You know, you can set the time and day restrictions in like multiple places along the way. But anyway, it looks okay, so I think that's going to be good. And now we have to try to test to see if our user can get access to the server.